So welcome, everybody. Today, we're going to have a really interesting conversation. There's something about the unseen therapist that those who may be newcomers to it aren't quite familiar with, and that is it does a lot of things behind the scenes if you learn how to listen to the wisdom of it. Now, this wisdom is available to us all. We have to learn how to listen, but we have a special guest today, Marian Billits, Dr. Marian Billits, PhD, who's had 4 experiences. She has more than that, but we're going to share. She's going to share with us 4 experiences that she's had that really should get your attention. So I'd stay tuned for all 4. And by the way, you may want to look below this from time to time at the essential links, because they will take you to places. We'll give you the free introductory ebook, The Unseen Therapist, advanced training, free support, and this kind of thing. So with that in mind, let me bring on Marian here. Say hello, Marian.
Hi, everybody.
Hi. Okay. So Marian is a very seasoned over the decades. Would I say that right, Marian? A psychotherapist?
Yes, decades.
Okay. And what we're going to talk about today is things you've experienced, but anybody can experience them. Okay. Mm-hmm. Anyway, let's start. It was around the time you and I first met, I think. We were having some conversations. You were having a issue, among other things, with an ankle or so. Tell that story, would you?
Sure. It was a few years ago, and I just had joined Optimal EFT. And I was about to speak at one of your webinars. So we were talking on Skype about what I was going to say. And before we began, you asked me how I was doing. And I mentioned that I had a pain in my ankle. I had broken my ankles a few years before and had surgery. It healed. I was doing fine. And then a few months ago, it started hurting me. And nothing I did seemed to change it. So we went on after that. You just noted it. We went on and discussed what was going to be in the webinar. And at one point, Gary, you stopped and you said, "How's your ankle doing?" And I moved my ankle around. I said, "There's no pain. It's completely gone." And I was really confused how that happened. And then you said to me, "Well, I've been doing conversational optimal EFT while we were talking." And I vaguely knew what that was because I had read the Unseen Therapist book, but I was astounded. And I don't know, Gary, if you want to explain what conversational optimal EFT is.
Sure. Let me do that. What was happening at this time was you told me about your ankle, okay, but we were having another conversation, and so I just, because I'm used to this and I've been practicing and so on, okay, I just brought in Unseen Therapist mentally, and I imagined in this case my ankle being painful. I think it was been a while now, but I think it was something like I'd imagine it being red and inflamed, and I'm just bringing in my imagination Unseen Therapist, and I imagine some nice, cooling, loving little breeze coming around, love around the ankle, the inflamed, reddish part of it, and just while we were talking, and hoping that was going to do something. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so I checked in with you, and it went from whatever it was to zero. Okay. And it hasn't come back since, as I understand it.
No, that was a few years ago. Absolutely no pain whatsoever.
Yeah. So that'll get your attention because there's no placebo involved in there. You didn't even know it was happening. Yes. You had no belief in it or disbelief. Nothing. Okay.
Yes.
And it just happened. Now, we got more stories to tell, but I'm going to back up here a second because I don't want listeners to think that, oh, all you got to do is this and everything fixes. No, that's not so. Conversational EFT can do a lot of good, a lot of times in a lot of places. But there's other training goes on. It isn't just that. I just don't imagine, somebody with stage 4 cancer, all of a sudden it's gone. It doesn't work quite that way. But we do get this conversational EFT, and it's a big clue about the power that goes on. For more challenging things, there's more training to do. Now, you have another story, please.
Well, actually, I want to add one thing to that because I think people who are trying to learn how to do this should know that it's not as easy as it sounds in a sense when you talk about it, because you've been doing it for a long time. So after this experience, I became very interested in trying conversational optimal EFT. And what I found was that it was hard for me because I felt like I had to multitask to listen to someone's conversation and at the same time have the unseen therapist work on whatever the issue was. And I found it difficult. I found it difficult to do that until I remembered something that one of the other members, Anne Ryan, had said, is she just gives it over to the unseen therapist and just lets the unseen therapist do the healing. And so I started to do that. I started to just give it over and let go. And when I did that, I didn't feel so conflicted about where my attention was going to be. I just let it go. And I found that I got better and better at it as I did that. So people should know that it's a skill that you have to work on.
Yeah, and in a way, when I gave the example of me imagining, the inflamed thing and all that, in my ankle being, again, we're all one. That's all part of our course as well. We're all connected. That's a quantum physics thing, and it's been proven over and over again that we're all connected and so on. But me doing that sounds very difficult because you got to have a conversation and you're doing this other thing at the same time. Well, I'm used to it, so I can do that. All right. Just because I've practiced it. But I can also, just like you do, just say, oh, ankle, turn it over, please, and go on with the conversation. Okay. Mm-hmm. So anyway, good thought. Good thought. Okay. Now, the next experience, please.
Okay. The next two are people that I was working with as a psychologist, and interesting experiences with them with the unseen therapist. The first was a man who I had worked with who had been abused as a child by a priest. And he had come to me many years ago before optimal EFT. I just did tapping with him. And we used the Telestory Technique. For people who don't know what that is, when you use that technique, you begin the story at a point before anything bad happened. And then tell the story moment by moment, and any moment that brings some kind of discomfort, we stop and we tap until that gets down to a 0.
Okay.
So
now, let me just a second, just for those who don't know about tapping, the EFT tapping is another form of EFT that I brought out clear back in 1995. Our newer form, optimal EFT, which involves the spiritual dimension or the unseen therapist, is our latest advancement. But please go ahead.
Okay,
he's used to tapping. A lot of people are used to tapping, good results, and so on.
Loved the results. He would speak at conferences about it for people who've been abused. He was enamored with EFT. So he came back to see me not that long ago, and he wanted to do tapping. I introduced him to the concepts of optimal EFT, and we tried it a few times. But he said, I want to stick with tapping, EFT tapping. That worked for me. I want to do that. So what I would do is before a tapping session, in my own mind, I would hand it over to the unseen therapist and ask for her help before we started tapping. And then we would tap, and he was doing very well. He was working on a problem that he had. He was having trouble finding a solution for. And he didn't find the solution, but he was doing well with the tapping. His anxiety level had decreased. And one day when we were tapping, I was prompted to say to him, let's try an experiment. Let's just try bringing in the unseen therapist before we tap together and see what happens. We'll try it. So he said, okay. And so we did. We tapped, and oh no, I'm sorry. I've got this mixed up. I didn't say that to him. We just tapped, and he stopped and he started laughing. And he said, I wanted to just do tapping. I didn't want to work with the unseen therapist, but she came in anyway. She started talking to me, and she gave me the solution to my problem. So after that, he was open to working with her.
That becomes astonishing after a while. I mean, sometimes you think, well, that's just coincidence, but you get these notions with enough frequency, it's no longer coincidence. Okay. And so what you really did, and correct me if you don't think I say this correctly, is you called on unseen therapy. You know, she's always guiding, she's always talking to us, but we're not always inviting her. Okay. Our ego gets in the way, the client's ego gets in the way, you know, and so on. And so that sort of takes over, and we know what we're doing. But if you'll just be quiet and listen, and that's one of the real skills here, is learning to listen, then here it comes. Here it comes. Here it comes. And I think that's what you were experiencing and he was experiencing. Sound right?
Yes. Yes. Listening and being patient.
Yeah.
Just letting go and being patient.
Yeah. It doesn't necessarily, by the way, come just like you would like it, like you're having breakfast, you know, and having a conversation over the table with the unseen therapist. No, it comes in notions, it comes in pictures, it comes later, and it comes in different ways depending on people, but it shows up as long as we're listening. All right.
And it showed up even though he didn't want the unseen therapist to show up. She was there anyway, and she gave him his answer. Yeah. So now he's okay with working with the unseen therapist.
Sure. All right. Good.
The other example was a woman who came to see me, and she was experiencing depression and some anxiety, some fears, and she wanted to do tapping on those issues. Again, she had heard about tapping. I explained to her about optimal EFT, and she just said, we'll see. She also, in the first session, told me that she had lost her baby in an accident many decades ago. And she said, I'm not here to work on that. I just wanted you to know that happened to me. So I filed that away knowing we're going to need to work on this. But
let me stop you a second. Am I hearing in there something like, that's too intense for me, I really don't want to go there? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, but I want you to know it's there.
Yeah, okay. All right, go ahead.
Yes. So the fact that she brought it up meant, okay, we are going to have to work on it at some point. But I let her pace herself. And we worked on her anxieties and her fears using tapping. And just like with that man I described, I would, before I began tapping, I would ask the unseen therapist for help internally, not necessarily out loud. And things were going well. She was doing pretty well with that. And then that was when I felt prompted one day to say, let's try this experiment and let's just ask the unseen therapist to come in and help us with the tapping together. And so she agreed. And so we tuned into the unseen therapist and then did the tapping. And it went phenomenally well. Things went faster. She went deeper into it. And at the end of it, she said, do you think we could use the unseen therapist to work on the day my daughter died? And that was when she was ready.
I'll tell you, thank you for that, because that brings up a point that's really important. A lot of people, and probably people listening to this, like the tapping thing. They're not quite used to bringing in the spiritual dimension and so forth. Okay, great. Tapping is a good job, especially if it's done well and professionally as you can do it. All right. But the unseen therapist will do things, not only the kind of things you're asking for, but it will start doing things outside of what you're asking for if you are aware of it. Sometimes we're just not aware of these possibilities. But here, if I hear it right, what's happening with this client of yours, the let's work on the baby thing, the baby's death thing, the daughter's death, is so intense. I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there. And in the background, it gets softened, and I'm guessing even partially resolved, enough so. He says, let's go this direction. Does that seem right?
Yes, and there were things that happened that pretty much confirmed that. Like, for instance, she never would mention her daughter's name to me at the beginning. She just told me she had this baby. And it took a while, but eventually her name started to come into the session. She would just mention her name after maybe a month. So I think things were softening as we were working together.
Yeah. Yeah.
And perhaps the unseen therapist was helping a little bit at a time until she was ready.
I get a number of reports from students of this that are starting to recognize that these other things that are happening out there, if we're listening to unseen therapists, other things that are happening out there, we don't expect them, so we don't look for them. And so they happen and they're outside of our awareness, but now we're starting to look for them. And indeed, they are there. I'm thinking of one of our members was working on herself, depression and a lot of issues, getting lots of results. But she never once brought her husband into any of the self-work she was doing. And then it turns out that her husband, who for 40 years had a foot problem, that is, gradually the padding on the bottom of his feet was gone. So it was very painful to walk, especially without shoes. That left. It just left. Now, can we prove that was the unseen therapist? No. Can we disprove it? No. Is there any other explanation? No. This is the kind of thing that is considered impossible in the medical professions. Anyway, you have another one.
Yes.
And we'll finish with that. Please tell us that. It's fascinating, but please tell us.
Okay. The last one is something that happened to me. I was in the hospital with a urinary tract infection, but I was very, very ill. And I knew that I was very ill. And nothing seemed to be helping. And so I asked the unseen therapist, what do I need to know? What do I need to do so I can get better? Is there a deep meaning to this illness? Is there something I'm avoiding? What is it I need to do? I don't want to die now. And what she said is, drink water. And I said, okay, I'll drink water, but what do I need to do? Looking for some deep meaning. And she just kept saying, drink water, drink water. So I decided to listen, and I drank a glass of water every hour, all the time, even at night, because you're up a lot in the hospital. And they could measure how much I was drinking. And the doctor said to me the next day, you're not hurting yourself, but there's no reason why you need to drink so much water. And I heard her voice inside say, don't listen to the doctor, just keep drinking water. So I did. I continued drinking it. And the next day, the doctor came back with the results of my culture, which showed that I had an antibiotic-resistant bacteria in my urinary tract. And he said, you've been flushing it out with all the water and helping yourself get better. And that was a real eye-opener for me about how I could listen, even when it seemed like a very minor answer or minor thing to do. She told me what I needed to do.
Well, and even when the doctor's basically telling you don't need to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that's interesting because we are conditioned to listen to the doctor. They have a lot of training. God bless them. You know, I heap all kinds of accolades on them for all the effort it takes. But they aren't the unseen therapist. But we are conditioned to think, well, if the doctor says so, that's what I should do, and I shouldn't listen to anything else. I mean, that's how our conditioning tends to go. You didn't do that. You didn't do that. You were listening to the other side, and you drank the water anyway. Yes?
Yes. Now, he did say to me, you're not hurting yourself. I would have been a little more scared if he said you're hurting yourself, but I still probably would have listened because this voice was so clear. Drink water, drink water. And that helped.
I'm curious about something. When you hear the voice that says drink water, is that a notion? Do you hear words? Is it in your head? Is it a ticker tape going in front of your eyes? I mean, how do you hear drink water?
All of those things. In that case, it was words. But when I get those kinds of messages, it could be like a ticker tape. It could be words going across the screen of my mind. It could be a feeling. It could be a song. Like one time I asked, I was not feeling well, and I asked the unseen therapist, why am I not feeling well? And she played a song of Simon and Garfunkel's in my head, the 59th Street Bridge, which is slow down, you move too fast.
Yeah.
And that was clearly the problem. So sometimes it could be in the form of a song that pops in your head. It varies. And everybody is different. Some people are more visual and they'll get visual answers. Some people will get things that they hear. For me, it's everything.
Yeah. I get it in a variety of ways myself. But the important thing is, in fact, everybody gets these things. They just don't listen to it because it gets overwhelmed by your ego thoughts all the time. Your ego knows what to do, and then and all the conditioning and everything else that goes on. But as we learn to listen, there's a wisdom there. There's a wisdom there that we're turning our back on until we learn how to wisdom anyway, or learn how to listen. Anyway, that's the message of the day. Okay. Anything more you want to add, Marianne?
Actually, I might add one thing of how I came to start to listen to that inner voice of wisdom, because it came slowly. It started with an eating disorder. And the approach that I was using in getting over my eating disorder had me focus on learning to listen to my body's signals of hunger and fullness and differentiating emotions from physical hunger. And as I started to listen, I realized my body had a wisdom about food and what it needed. And then I started to realize my body had a wisdom about my emotional needs. And then from there, it evolved into a spiritual awareness, that I had a greater awareness of what I needed. So it started concrete for me around listening to the wisdom of my body around food, and grew to an awareness that I had this inner guidance that I could rely on.
All right. Fascinating. Marian, thank you so much. I'm sure our listeners are going to pick up a lot on this and be helpful to a lot of people.
I hope so.
All right.
Okay.
All right, folks. Don't forget to look at the essential links below, and I will see you next time.